Welcome back to East Coast DNA. Today's guest, we have Mike Campbell. Thanks, Mike, for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, music fans would know Mike from a number of places over the years. Myself, I definitely have to admit some inspiration, Mike, your early days with Much Music, and more specifically, probably Much East.
Yeah.
That's quite an inspiration for the type of format that I'm doing these days. Like it's technically a podcast, but I kind of tore apart the rules of a podcast and just basically made like the old Much Music shows. I'll find a band, sit with them wherever, and record a conversation and do what I can with that for a little piece of content. So thank you for all your years of work back in the day.
Oh, no problem.
And you landed in Halifax as your central location way back in the heyday of the music industry being huge around here.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm timing quite often they say is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. I barely recall when I moved here, but I'm pretty sure it was 1994,
Okay.
which was about the same time that the pop explosion was happening, and there was again an explosion of
Yes.
East Coast talent. There was an awful lot going on. And much had had much west for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that they wanted to do a much east show, but I also knew that they would probably want to be hosted by someone that they'd worked with.
Sure.
So through a string of coincidences, which is too long and involved to get into, I wound up in Halifax. I knew that the Mike and Mike's Excellent Cross Canada Adventures show was kind of wrapping up at that point because
Mm-hmm.
we'd already been everywhere and it was an expensive show to do. And we had the resources out here because we owned two TV stations at the time. Chum owned ASN and ATV.
Oh, cool.
So when I wasn't on the road, I still did the Mike and Mike show the first year I was in town. Um, so when I wasn't on the road, I could always just get a camera from one of our TV stations and then do work for some of the other networks that we had, like Bravo or Star TV or something like that. And then when the Mike and Mike show had finished its run, I got a call from Denise Donlin, my boss, to tell me that the show was canceled, which was no great surprise to me. And then she said, but, I've got good news and bad news. And I was like, okay. Said, the good news is we want to do a Much East show and you're going to it's going to be your show.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's great. She said, the bad news is you're also going to be the cameraman, the editor, and the producer. So it was a one-man operation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd farted around with Betacam before when we'd had a cameraman who had to leave the trip for one reason or another. And it quickly gave me a crash course in it, but it was an awful lot for me to learn. Everything from how to mic things to how to light things, how to do all of that stuff. So they dropped off a company vehicle, a ton of gear, and we started the show. And I'm sure the first few were dodgy at best, but eventually I got the hang of it and really felt privileged to be here in that particular time and space. And again, a lot of it had to do with luck, but at the end of the day, luck is for rabbits.
Yeah.
And if it presents itself, then it's up to you to make the best of it and hope that you have the skills to pull it off. And I know that the show had a huge impact because I've been told that by a lot of people. So hearing it from you is great. And I'm happy that it was inspirational in some fashion. The only issue that we had really with the show was that at the time there were virtually no East Coast videos. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the Rankins had videos, like Rita MacNeil probably had videos, but the bands that I gravitated towards, which were obviously the independent bands,
Mm-hmm.
didn't. So I had to kind of hip everybody to the fact that there was a much fact grant, video fact grant that I encouraged everyone to take advantage of because I knew that would probably be approved
Mm-hmm.
because we needed content. And thankfully, a lot of those bands that were coming up at the time started to take advantage of that. And then of course, the idea was to try and get in as much, try and make airtime for as many bands from not just Halifax, but all of Atlantic Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a point at the time of trying to make it to every major city, town on the East Coast, visiting, made sure I found the up and coming bands and tried to shine a light on some of them. So it was important to me to get to Moncton and St. John and Fredericton and Charlottetown and St. John's and Yarmouth.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody needs to see Burnt Black.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so, um, so it was like a, love affair. And then when things exploded out here and Sub Pop was in town and signing everybody they could find at the time, like Jail and Hardship Post and Eric Strip, was starting to happen. And there was a big excitement about it. And I really did feel like I was in the right place at the right time.
And then you were able to transition all that too, as MuchMusic, we all know, kind of phased out of music videos and all of those shows went away, but you were able to continue on in the music industry with having quite a very active role. Not always in front of the camera, a lot of behind the scenes work.
Mm. Well, I mean, I'd been working in the music industry since I quit my third year of university just before graduating and took a job in a record store because that's the best job in the world. I want to
Mm-hmm.
work in a record store. I can't imagine a better gig. And so I worked in a record store and then worked for Attic Records, which at the time was Canada's largest independent label. And then I got laid off from there and I started an independent promotion company in Ottawa called Fire for Hire, where majors would hire me when they had a band coming to town to make sure that the stores were stocked and displays were up and to work with the artists when they were in town, like Huey Lewis is coming to town, so let's take him to all the radio stations and he can do sports
Mm-hmm.
because that was the name of his album.
Yeah, yeah.
And then take the band out afterwards. I remember taking Huey and his band down to Barrymore's in Ottawa to see a friend of mine's band, Tom Wilson,
Okay.
who at the time had a band called the Florida Razors. And I think it was a Wednesday night, and there was probably 12 people in a 400-seat club. And it was like me, Huey Lewis and his whole band,
Yeah.
and the MCA rep at the time, Cam Carpenter, and that was it. And we spent the whole night standing right in front of the stage, and Huey got up and played harmonica and stuff. So that was kind of a fun gig to have. And then again, through an incredible bunch of just random things, Well, it wasn't even random. I wound up playing in a summer softball league with Erica Mykowski, who was taking communications, I think, at Ottawa U, and also working at Records on Wheels. And she was leaving, well, she graduated and then she went to work on the switchboard at City TV. And when it came time for the license application for the music television channel, she knew that I'd worked in the music biz, so they were looking for letters of support. And with only a couple of days' notice, because that's the way things work,
Yeah.
She asked me if I would write a letter of support, and I did not have time to do it. But I thought, why not? I've never done it before. So I wrote a letter to the CRTC, and they eventually invited me to the hearings, because anybody who wrote a letter, they're called letters of intervention, for or against. And I wound up being the only private citizen to appear at the hearings person.
Wow.
And when we got the license, I happened to be in Toronto for Canada Music Week when they announced it, and ran into Moses Neimer, who ran the place, and he remembered me from the hearings, and it was like, I see your company or your job is called Fire for Hire, which is what my promotion company was called. Pretty good name, Fire for Hire. I thought that was genius. And he said, I really like that you're, working for yourself, but I think you'll go farther if you come to work for me. And I was completely freaked out because everybody in the world wanted to work for this new television network that nobody knew exactly what it was going to be. And I eventually started there in the cable relations department, and then everything happened over the years from then. But it was a great, obviously a fantastic place to work, and gave me a huge opportunity with the shows that I was hosting. But the Much East show is different, because when Much was making that transition to what I like to call, certainly in hindsight, irrelevance, it just became whatever. I was isolated out here on the East Coast doing my show and not paying any attention to what the network was doing. Nobody told me what videos to play. Nobody told me what to cover. So I was kind of shielded from that downward trend Much was taking, until, of course, they finally got to me, and it was like, yeah, we're going to cancel the show. And at that point, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but by then I was involved with managing Joel Plaskett with Sherry Jones, and that kept me busy. And then I wound up programming the talent for the National Arts Center's first Atlantic Scene festival, I guess you'd call it. So I did a whole pop and rock booking for that. And I booked bands from all over Latin Canada, especially ones before they hit, like the Trues and that kind of thing, the Novaks. And then that went from that to producing Juno Fest, the first time the Junos were in Halifax, which was a monumental task.
I can imagine.
I don't know how many venues, I can't even remember how many venues we had, and I had to fill them. And it was a very limited budget and all the rest of it, but we broke all the attendance records for previous Juno Fest on the very first night, and it was a 2-night thing, so we crushed it. And then it bounced around, and doing contract to contract in the music business is exceedingly precarious when you have a mortgage and stuff. So Nothing really was on the horizon. And so I kind of reverted to plan C, which was, why not open a bar?
Sure. Yeah.
Why not open a bar restaurant? How hard could that be? Because I was an idiot. And even getting that thing off the ground and running was a miracle in itself. So I opened the Carleton, and then I was too busy to work with Joel anymore because I was 100% involved in that enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as it cost me personally, mentally, everything else that goes with doing that, and then dealing with the construction of the Nova Center,
Mm-hmm.
a 5-year nightmare of no one's downtown anymore, nobody's on
Yeah.
Argyle Street. Oh my God. Almost losing everything as a result. I don't know. Well, I do know because I'm still here and I'm talking to you. But
Sure.
I think in hindsight, when I look back on it, because the Carleton has been around now for its 16th year, so almost as much time as I worked at MuchMusic, which is
Mm-hmm.
like 18 years. So it's become a gigantic part of my life, and I never intended it to be a live music venue,
Mm-hmm.
like, because I'm not an idiot. It's like, but because of my background, everyone expected me to have some kind of live music component
Yeah, that
to the
makes sense.
place. So my idea was, well, once a month, I'll book somebody on, a Sunday or a Monday, some terrible night for restaurants, and but just once a month. So the first artist I booked was Plaskett, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and then Jill Barber, I think, was the second one, and then the third month I booked a completely or virtually unknown artist named Steve Poltz. And then, of course, we opened in 2008 in May, and everything was great. And then in the fall of 2008, the bottom fell out of the global economy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like turning off a tap. Like people stopped going out to dinner. People, they cut back on entertainment first.
Mm-hmm.
But my partners at the time were like, well, business sucks, but whenever you book an artist, the place is full. So we think you should book more artists. And I was like, you guys, that's very slippery slope
Mm-hmm.
because when we start doing that, people are going to think of us as a venue
Yeah.
as opposed to a bar restaurant. And in my brain, it's like, and I still think that's right. I don't understand why people can't hold more than one thought in their head
Yeah.
at a time. It's like, why can't you be all three things?
Mm-hmm.
People are always like, well, are you a bar or are you a restaurant? You said, well, you can't have a liquor license without a restaurant. You have to
Mm-hmm.
have a kitchen. So everywhere is a bar restaurant. But we were constantly being asked to choose which we were. And then the public, of course, made up its own mind and they decided that we were a venue,
Mm-hmm.
and which makes the bar restaurant side of the operation, which is awesome, less of a factor for people. And because we were in that situation, I'd had an idea like in 2005, probably, because I was looking forward to having to create a job for myself, as I'd always done. I said, you know what the city, you know what this town needs? Whenever you ask anybody about the East Coast, all they get in their heads is lobster traps, fishing boats, and lighthouses,
Mm-hmm.
which is bullshit. There's a lot more to it than that. And if we're known for anything above and beyond those obvious stereotypical things, it's our musical talent, it's our songwriting talent. So what we need is a songwriters festival.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And I wanted something that, would roll off the tongue like TIFF. If I go to Toronto, there are posters up everywhere in the airports talking about TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival. So for some reason, I thought Halifax Urban Folk Festival, HUFF. And I didn't associate it with sniffing glue,
Yeah. Yeah.
which that's the verb for sniffing glue.
Mm-hmm.
But the urban part of it was there on purpose because I've been to big outdoor festivals and stuff, and I've been to the Winnipeg Folk Festival and the Edmonton Folk Festival during my MuchMusic days. And the last thing I want to do at the age I was at was drive for an hour and go to some hayfield and put a blanket down and then have hay poke into my ass and then start being eaten alive by mosquitoes. And then it's dark and I can't find the bathroom. And then I'm supposed to camp.
Mm-hmm.
What if it rains, which it will? So the urban part was to drive home the point that it was situated in a perfectly good city where weather won't matter, where people will bring food and drink to your table. And business was such that I just decided I'm going to start this festival
Mm-hmm.
in 2010 with about 2 months advance notice. And all my friends got together with me and they tried to stage an intervention. Like, you haven't got time. Maybe it was 3 months ahead of something. But in 2005, before the Carleton even opened, I hatched this idea. And I had a bunch of the opinion leaders in town, like Stuart Jolliffe, who was the vice president of Delta Hotels, and Brooks Diamond, who'd run the Atlantic Folk Festival, and Louis Thomas, and all these, heavyweight people. And they were all saying, well, you should do it over the Labor Day weekend because Halifax is a place that everyone leaves for Labor Day weekend instead of comes to Labor Day
Sure.
weekend. So the hotels will love you because people will come to see it and you'll have artists staying there and all the rest of it. So, and it's a long weekend. So we did it on the Labor Day weekend for years, like for 13 years or whatever it was. And during that time, Halifax suddenly became a destination for Labor Day weekend. There's, big outdoor volleyball tournaments and shit. And then hotels got hugely expensive and, people were busy taking their kids back to school or
Mm-hmm.
the last weekend at the cottage or something. So last year we changed it to the week before Thanksgiving. And I don't know if it helped attendance or if it really made any difference, but we decided to do that. But, the first year, everybody had to step in and like, I'll find you somebody to make a logo, booking talent and stuff. And I'd always had this idea that trying to get talent for it, there's a million people that are out there that will never tour out here. Like
Mm-hmm.
they won't. Certainly after the year 2000, because when I was doing Much East, I probably spent, during the late 90s, I probably shot at the McGuinness Room at Dow, like every couple of weeks,
Mm-hmm.
1,200 students to see Econoline Crush from Vancouver or, any number of bands. Like we could between the two of us, we could probably list about 20
Mm-hmm.
easily. And by the time I was finishing up Much East in the early 2000s, I didn't shoot at any university, period, because students stopped going to see live entertainment
Yeah.
everywhere, not just here,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. So no one toured out here anymore. So my great idea, my genius idea, I still think it's the smartest thing, was I was thinking of all these artists, knowing that they would never come here, and knowing that we couldn't afford to bring in full bands, but I figured if I could convince the main songwriter to come, we had enough local musical talent that could put bands together for them.
Mm-hmm.
And also hit on the idea that I don't want them just coming to town and flying out. I want them to spend time here. So up until this year, we've always flown in 3 headliners, and they headline one gig with the All-Star Band,
Mm-hmm.
and the other 2 nights that they're here, because they're here for 3 nights, they're part of an opening songwriters circle, opening for the headliner. So at any night on the final weekend of the festival, you could see all 3 headliners in the same night. It's just 2 of them are playing acoustically and one's playing with the band.
Mm-hmm.
And because I bought all the booze for the club on a corporate credit card, I had like grillions of points. And instead of taking myself on a nice vacation to Australia every year, I used those points to fly in the headliner so it wouldn't cost us anything, which is an awfully altruistic thing.
Mm-hmm. For
That's
sure.
what I think of it. But, and the headliners also had to, I was right. Everybody had heard of Halifax. Everybody wanted to come to Halifax. Everybody wanted the opportunity to come to Halifax. So if I could talk to the artists directly and explain to them this very complicated situation where you play twice 3 songs acoustically and, you know, blah, blah, trying to explain that to managers or agents,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't even get through the first paragraph and somebody would go, shut up, what do you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
about it? I can't follow it. But once I got the artist to agree to it, then I was like, I'm not trying to avoid the proper channels. It's just, I need you to know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll take it to the agent, knowing that you're interested and how much money's involved and everything else. And then if you don't hear back from the agent, then you'll know that the agent is not taking it seriously,
Yeah, yeah.
which is usually the case. It's like, that's not enough money. Jesus, my commission is fuck all.
Yeah.
So luckily, the artists I approached were all keen about it, and they trusted me enough to put bands together. And once we started doing it and it was successful, everybody, you know, artists talk amongst themselves. So many of them suggested other artists that I should talk to about it, and that kind of snowballs. So I wound up getting ridiculously cool people here that have no business ever playing
Yeah.
in Halifax, much less one that holds 100 people like the Carleton. So it became a very special thing. And then after getting through that first year by the skin of my teeth, where really it was just the Carleton, which does not a festival make to me.
Mm-hmm.
You need more than one venue. And we also, you know, I had no clue about applying for grants or anything else, but we managed to get through the first year. And then the next year we got organized, you know, I got a proper board and got all the right people involved, and we managed to keep going, even though trying to convince people in Halifax to go see people they've never heard of is just as hard today as it was then.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. You know, Halifax is just one of those towns. Personally, I think that we should put tickets on sale for next year as soon as the festival's over, and
Yeah.
it should sell out before I've even announced an artist, like the Newport Folk Festival. Sadly, that's a dream I've given up on a long time ago. You know, Halifax is just not that kind of town.
Hmm.
People are last minute all the time, which causes me a great deal of angst, sleepless nights, and anxiety. So I don't know why I do it, because I don't
Yeah.
get paid. I don't get paid to do it. But when you're in the room and you're watching something that you've put together happen,
Hmm.
like Norman Blake or Matthew Sweet, for
Yeah.
instance, who no one ever expected to play. One of my favorite stories is the same for both those artists. I would text Matt Mays and go, "Hey, how would you like to play guitar for Matthew Sweet, Matthew Sweet's All-Star Band, or Norman Blake's from Teenage Heads, or from Teenage Fan Club's All-Star Band," and getting huge in all caps words that I shouldn't use, and like, if you
Hmm.
don't let me play, I will never speak to you again, and I would pay you to play with those guys. You know, getting the reaction from locals to being able to play with heroes of theirs makes everything worthwhile when you're
Hmm.
in the room, like you're standing in the room watching something happen that there's no way on earth would ever happen unless we were doing this work. And people that appreciate it a lot. And the people that don't appreciate it or can't imagine it, I don't
Hmm.
care about.
Yeah. At least with this type of thing too, is that the people that are maybe not interested, they're not like going out of their way to tell you that they're not interested. It's just not on their radar. And then the people that are interested, they will go out to shows, and when they see you, they'll tell you that they really
Yeah,
appreciate
I mean,
this.
the irony of that is, and this happens after every single one, and this is our 15th year, so I will just randomly run into somebody and they go, "Holy smokes, you mean to tell me David Perner from Soul Asylum was here?" And I would go, "Yeah, I didn't hear anything about it." I was like, "I don't know how you could have missed it. I did an interview with every media outlet in the area, and short of phoning you up personally to tell you about it, or
Yeah.
knocking on doors, handing things out to people like a Jehovah's Witness, people just don't pay attention, you know?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I really don't know what more I can do. So I love it when people take an interest in what we're doing, and I get a chance to blather on about it like I'm doing right now, and hope that some people hear about it that otherwise wouldn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly. And actually, to that point, I know you probably have a busy day in front of you yourself. So, for people that are interested now, because they heard about the history of it, or maybe it's somebody that's not from the area that just heard about it now and they're thinking, hey, maybe I will head up to Halifax. It's September 30th when the week of events kicks off.
Yeah, we do an entire week at the Carleton because the Carleton is
Yeah.
the spiritual home of the festival. And then there are various shows through at the end. There's like on the weekend, on the
Hmm.
following weekend in Rad Storm, which is an all ages venue at the basement, which is just down the street from us, and at the Marquee
Yes.
Club as well. So if you want to get a line on what's happening, who's playing where, when, etc., then the Halifax Urban Folk Festival.com is the
Perfect.
place to go, or the Carleton.ca for shows at the Carleton. We've sold out a bunch of the Carleton shows,
Yes, I
but
see
there's
that.
still tickets available for plenty of stuff. And, you know, we've got 3 weeks, I
Perfect.
think,
Yeah.
3 weeks to go. And I'm excited about it. This year's lineup is as good as any lineup we've had. So I have fingers crossed that, just like I do every year,
Yeah.
people will come to their senses and they will go out to see some shows. And I especially think that that should be true of young people.
Hmm.
Now, being a geezer and growing up in my entire life in the music industry and knowing how important it is to see a live music, like being in the room, seeing it is unlike any other experience. Uh, I've spoken to so many kids who are at university age or even in their mid to late 20s
Hmm.
who've never seen a live music show in their
Yeah.
lives. And I can't even fathom that. It was like, how, what?
Yeah, it's hard to
How,
imagine.
what?
I've met some, but it's hard to imagine.
Oh, it's like, try it on for size. Go out to see somebody. If you hate it, then, fair enough. But you should really try it on for size. It's not clearly not what you think it is,
Yeah,
because otherwise you'd have been there already. But I encourage people, especially people who've never seen live music, to come out and see some. You know, what's it going to cost you? The price of some fancy cocktail that you
yeah,
won't
yeah,
drink,
exactly,
that you won't think twice about, or ordering out for Uber Eats or something. I mean, it's really no more expensive than that. So
exactly.
give it a shot, give it a whirl, try it on for size.
Absolutely. So everyone out there should go out and get their tickets right now. And if you have any questions about the specific schedule or the fact that there's a couple extra venues on there, like Mike said, you can check out the website. And down below in the description for this episode, there will be a link and probably a little
Attaboy.
bit of details on some of the headliners this year. So if anybody wants to follow those bands, go out and find them online as well, and stay tuned to East Coast DNA as we'll try to bring you a lot of news and coverage from the Halifax Urban Folks Festival and those bands as well. Thank you for your time, Mike.
Well,
And
thank you for your time.
well, hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Tomorrow? Next
Yeah,
week?
there you go. Perfect.
Thanks very much, man. I appreciate
Great.
it a lot.
And we'll talk soon. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.